Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 has finally dropped in theaters, so it's time to talk spoilers. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your spoiler-packed thoughts on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. This is a spoiler review, so no need to put a spoiler warning down below in the comment section. People were warned by the title and thumbnail of the video, as well as by what I'm saying right now. Also, I got chapter markers down below so you can skip ahead to whatever spoiler-packed discussion you are most interested in. And let's get started with my thoughts on the movie after a second viewing. And I don't have a whole lot to say here because, essentially, after second viewing, I agree with what I said after my first viewing. This is a great send-off to the Guardians of the Galaxy, a movie that manages to balance the humor and the heartbreak. It has some of the best action sequences of James Gunn's Guardians films. Everybody gets their own little arc. Everything is paid off so well. They found the right way to kind of land the ship, close out their journey in a way that was satisfying but was unexpected. And there are a couple clunky things about the story, but as I said in my review before, I don't really care. When it comes to what did it make me feel, both the emotions the story pulled out as well as my reaction to it coming out of the theater, that's really what matters. And this movie made me feel big emotions and made me feel satisfied at the end. That's ultimately what its job was. So despite having some nitpicks about some story flow, which we'll get into some of the specifics as we dive into this. That's the point of a spoiler review. But I thought it absolutely worked. It nailed it. And as someone that had many issues with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, I feel like this movie was able to kind of course correct, where both movies have a mean streak. Both movies can be very dark. Both movies have big, gigantic tonal jumps. At their core, both movies are kind of about someone who's responsible for the creation of what's special about one of our Guardians trying to reacquire that person because they tie into the villain's grander scheme. Broad strokes, there's a lot of similarities between Ego and the High Evolutionary, not just because they have E-names, but this movie I felt on every single one of those similarities did the better version of it, where by having the High Evolutionary very early on being established as this terrifying villain that is disturbing and a psycho, you feel the stakes and the danger from the beginning. And then likewise, the balance between the laughs and the heartbreak, this one, I think, just bridged it better. It found a way to do both things, have his goofy side and his tragic side, but transitioned. It didn't just feel like harsh tonal jumps and just all the little areas. This was the better version of a lot of what he was doing in Guardians Volume 2. While I think having a more interesting story, and all the different things, and just such a satisfying conclusion. So after watching it a second time, once again, would say that this is a rock solid MCU film and a great send off for our Guardians. From there, let's just start going back through this thing. So the movie kicks off with Rocket pre-experiments being pulled out of a cage with a bunch of other raccoons and just this very somber, dread-inducing slow motion sequence. It's very simple. Just here's a cage, hands go in and grab him. And right out of the gate just establishes the personal nature of the story that's being told. Sure, massive in scope and size in many regards, entire planets being destroyed. Massive action sequences, celestial skulls of dead celestials crashing into massive spaceships. But what makes it so dark, what makes it so gut-wrenching, isn't that a whole planet gets destroyed. And not that it shrugs that off, but because it establishes the very personal, horrific nature of this villain right in the get-go, where you see a terrified raccoon being pulled from a cage. And then it does like a seamless transition of like zooms in on baby Rocket's face and then kind of zooms out as this acoustic version of Radiohead's Creep starts to play. And it kind of almost reframes entirely the character that we know, even in just that little bit. Like, we knew that he was tortured and traumatized because of what happened to him. But as soon as you see that version of him as the little baby Rocket who's terrified, and then you go into his face as grown-up Rocket, who is the current version that we know of him, and just see that sadness. And of course, the music is intended to communicate the inner workings of our characters. James Gunn's writes with the soundtrack in mind. It's very much kind of like the way a musical works, where when you have a musical, they bust into song and characters are able to say what they're feeling on the inside, so you can progress the story forward a great deal simply through song. So what do? This movie kicks off, and Rocket, who by this point in time in the narrative for us as the audience isn't just a Guardian of the Galaxy, he's also was an Avenger that stopped Thanos. Like, he's legitimately one of the handful of greatest heroes. He was a part of the Endgame team that time traveled to get the stones to bring back half the galaxy. The Guardian of the Galaxy, Savior of the Galaxy, Avenger. He's all of those things. But you frame him as he still defines himself based off of that. I'm a creep. Very much that intentional James Gunn soundtrack being used like a musical to communicate, to Tom York's words, what's really going on the inside. And so they show the Guardians in nowhere, which if you saw the holiday special, this is very much kind of picking up with where that placed them. And you have people having fun, you have people dancing, and in the middle of it, you just see kind of Rocket with a sadness, like a lingering sadness inside of him. And even as you kind of go, you drift off to see Star-Lord passed out drunk over Gamora, just setting the tone of this. That I think a line from Mantis really articulated what was trying to be framed in all of this, where towards the end of the film, where she's defending Drax for being a moron, which she agrees he's a moron, but what she says this line, she goes, he's the only one out of all of you that doesn't hate himself. And the movie starts off with Creep by Radiohead. Kind of goes through all the people and shows them passed out, drunk, sadness, making that point of as fun as they can be and as funny as they can be, they're people that with like a deep brokenness to them. And that brokenness is what brought them together. But the movie's about them moving past the Band-Aid that is the Guardians. The Guardians were great for the galaxy, and they were good for the people for a while, but they're also a Band-Aid in another sense. That they're not in crisis mode. And so the Guardians are a Band-Aid for a group of people that need to figure out what is truly what they're supposed to be doing with their lives. You get that all right in the beginning of the movie. You don't realize you're getting it all at the beginning of the movie. When you see it a second time, it plays very differently of the song choice, where this is all headed, where they're taking everything. But, I mean, I think that's what, to me, where this one worked so much better than Guardians 2. Guardians 2 kicks off, and, you know, our introduction to the Guardians is like them, like, it's Groot, baby Groot dancing while they're in a bit of a shootout. The Rocket steals some batteries, and we're in a chase. And it just kind of felt like we're rehashing things, we're doing stupid things. Like, it just didn't feel like it was setting anything clear. What is this about? And this one starts off, and you know what it's about. This broken group of people, in particular Rocket at the front and center. But when we see our Guardians where they're at, and just introduce all these little things that are going to be paid off later on. As simple as Kraglin and Cosmo, their banter, where he calls Cosmo a bad dog. And, excuse me. And we show them competing to use their powers, him with Yondu's arrow, her with the telekinesis. So who's more powerful? There's a rivalry. Kraglin, kind of dopey guy that hasn't been very useful up to this point in time in these movies. And he still hasn't figured out the arrow yet. Sets all this stuff up right at the beginning of the movie that we go back to it multiple times, but so that it can pay off so well at the end of the film. That's why the movie works. That's why it's so emotional, why it's so satisfying at the end, because it just does like the simple basic stuff of from the beginning, making it clear what this movie's about, from the beginning, setting up little things to have everyone have payoff as we get to the end. But then out of nowhere, Adam Warlock attacks. And it's almost a bit jarring how quickly this movie gets into motion, because it feels like we're just settling in to meet our Guardians, and then it cuts to crazy on you, gold thing out in the stars flying towards them, and then this movie just gets right into it with an action sequence that ties very much so into what the whole plot of the movie is about. Rocket, his importance. And so just right there, we're in the middle of it. You know, by the end of the scene, you know what our villains are trying to do, and you know what our Guardians are trying to do. Once again, why did I enjoy this movie so much more than Volume 2? Volume 2, it's unclear what the movie's really about until you're in the third act. This movie, you're in like the second major set piece, or first major set piece, but second sequence. Adam shows up, and you know what this movie's about. It's all about who can save Rocket, who can get Rocket. You know, the mystery that we're trying to solve about Rocket and his value right out of the gate. We know what the movie's about. And we've reiterated for a second time the very personal nature of the stakes here. We made it really sad with our opening shot of Rocket as little baby Rocket being victimized by a psycho. And then now we have grown-up Rocket that we love desperately fighting for his life right out of the gate. But also in addition to that, we have the sequence where our Guardians aren't together because they weren't expecting to be attacked. And so they have a good reason why they're fighting Adam one at a time. And no one of them individually can defeat him. But them as a whole actually would be he'd be a formidable villain for all of them, but they could defeat him. But because of the nature of the way this plays out, they're having to take him on one by one, in which case he's beating the crap out of a bunch of them. So right out of the gate, once again, establishing this guy is a formidable foe. If you're in a one-on-one fight with him, you're probably going to die. But there's also hope that we could defeat him because he's not invulnerable. So a bunch of cool fights in here, and then setting things in motion. Of course, the most important thing that happens is that Rocket gets shot in the chest. And I thought in my prediction videos, which were super accurate, that Rocket was going to be kidnapped. And therefore, they're trying to rescue him. Functionally, this is the same idea, though a totally different thing. So I thought he would get taken, therefore they're trying to get him back. And it plays out almost the exact same way as it would have had he been kidnapped, which is he's not kidnapped, he's just injured, and they still have to go to the place that they would have been if he'd been kidnapped. So functionally kind of played the same as what I said, but I was totally wrong at the exact same time. And I was reading the clues right that there was something with Rocket that takes him out of the equation with the main people, but I misread the flashbacks as being in the present timeline and got that stuff totally wrong. So prediction's kind of wrong, but also in the right direction. But I like having a clear goal that you're emotional about, that's personal, establishing a villain that's a serious threat, all of this right out of the gate. Clear from the get-go what everyone's journey is, arc, objectives, clear, all of it. That to me was huge for making this movie work better for me than Volume 2. Now on the subject of Adam Warlock, all cards on the table. I'm not particularly familiar with Adam Warlock, the comic book character. I have no investment. I'm very mildly familiar with his existence, but this isn't a character that I've read a bunch of stories in regards to him to be able to know what he's like in the comics. This, to me, and I said this in my review, felt like a mini version of the Taskmaster situation. And what I mean by that is that you take a great character from the comics, power set, rich backstory, and then you turn them into a glorified henchman. That's what this felt like to me. But as someone, once again, that doesn't know as much about Adam Warlock, I know how excited a lot of other people have been to see him for 6 years. And then you watch this movie and he's being sent by his mother to do something. He's a dimwit. Then he's eventually, like, it's very unclear even what his motives are. Like, what is he trying to do in the third act after his mother's been blown up? Like, what exactly is his objective? It's unclear. So, like, he has an arc. So I think there's more to Adam Warlock than to Taskmaster. And I don't think it was as bad of just, like, totally neutering the character of what made Taskmaster interesting, unique as a character. And then it's this whole other thing for a plot point in Black Widow. That's not the case here, but it did seem like they turned him into a doofus in a manner that struck me as odd. Like, this to me felt a bit like James Gunn had an idea of kind of where he wanted to go, put the post-credit scene in, but then when he started to actually write this movie, there wasn't as clear of a spot for the Sovereign and Adam Warlock. I almost keep saying Black Adam, for Adam Warlock as they really want. Or he wanted. And so it feels a little bit kind of like some redundancy in the plot here. There's a logic to it when it's High Evolutionary created the Sovereign. That to me makes the Sovereign more interesting, ties them into this trilogy a little bit better, makes it more cohesive. And it gives some explanations why is Adam Warlock undercooked and showing up too soon. Like, there's some things that make it work a little bit better. But as you're trying to tell this specific story, you have people trying to take Rocket and get Rocket back to this location while the Guardians are trying to also go to this location. And the people at this location have other people trying to get Rocket back to this location. So it's like, feels like there's a lot of redundancy in if all we're trying to do is get Rocket and our Guardians from here to here, we don't need to have two different people trying to take Rocket and the Guardians already just heading that direction. There's some of that redundancy. This is also why I don't think I do a good job of it, but why do letter grades and number grades? Because there's what's my emotional, like, what do I feel? Man, 9.5. Like, I don't have, like, emotionally, I don't have many issues with this film. Intellectually, I can look at it and be like, that was odd. That was clunky. I got to knock it back over here with the letter grade a little bit. I still think it works. Still very positive on it. Not quite as high as a 9.5 or something like that. That's why I do the two of them. I don't think I do a good, like I said, I have all sorts of issues. Too many of them are too similar. There should be more gap between the two of them more often. But, like, I look at this movie and I go, that's kind of weird. Like, did we really need Adam Warlock in this film? Like, what, did he need to be here? Or was he just something that was set up that they kind of had to follow up, that just was one more element in a film that already kind of had a lot of elements in it? I don't know. So we're off to the meat people. So Rocket gets hurt. Guardians go to check on him. Nebula's like, hey, wait, you can't use a med pack because he's got this thing in there for proprietary technology. So they have to go to this place that might have the records on him in this meat space station. And hopefully they can get the data that will be able to unlock the chipset so they can use the med pack on him and save his life. So on their way in, they need a little bit of help getting in. This is where the Ravagers, as well as Gamora, sync back up with our story. And couple things to talk about here on our Ravagers and Gamora. First one is still so fascinating why Stallone is in these movies. Said it many times before, Stallone is my favorite actor of all time. I've got a Rocky quote right here, and I got a gigantic Rocky poster right over here. The only full-size poster in my office, and I own a ton of full-size posters, the one full-size poster that is in my office is Rocky, because it's Stallone. And, of course, I love the MCU. And they have Stallone in the MCU, and he's in the second movie now, but it's in such small amounts that it's just confusing. How did Gunn get him? Why did Gunn get him? And why did Stallone say yes? It's just confusing. And because he's Stallone, he just casts such a big shadow. He's not the kind of person that you can just, like, if you did just one scene that was like a surprise cameo, and it was like, oh, that's Stallone, that'd be one thing. But, they advertised he's going to be in it, and it's enough of a subplot that it's like Stallone's in it. So as soon as Stallone pops up, it's Stallone. One of the, biggest movie stars, absolutely biggest actual classic movie star of the last 50 years. And like modern day movie stars don't compare to like Stallone movie star back in the 80s where like the name was the star, not the franchise. And this is a guy that wrote, directed a bunch of these movies. Like, this is a powerhouse. And he's just in a little bit. He's just sprinkled in there. And I wonder what that was like. Is that what he wanted to just like, yeah, I mean, I don't want to be like in a big Marvel movie, but like, sure, I'd love to like have just a little bit of put me out there a little bit to a different audience, be a little bit of fun. Was it that? Like, how did Gunn convince him to do it for a couple of these movies? And it's like a weird offshoot. I think this is the exact reason why he couldn't be in Creed 3. Because if he's not going to be a significant part to it, it's just so awkward if he just shows up for just a pinch. If you just sprinkle him in there, it's weird. And how much more so if he's not playing Ravager guy, but if Rocky's just in there a little bit, you're like, why wasn't he in here more? Like, what's going on here? So I think that exact kind of like, oh man, why is Stallone? What more Stallone if you're going to put Stallone in here? So that's so odd to me. I'd almost want to like do an interview just to like, Gunn, what's the deal with Stallone in here? Like, you just buddies with him? And is he a buddy with the same way that Michael Rosenbaum and Nathan Fillion is just one of your buddies? And you like just throw him in all your movies now? Because that's kind of what his last 3 movies all have Stallone in them. So anyway, rabbit trail there. But so then Gamora joins in, and the Infinity War films kinda put Gunn in a bit of a tricky spot because one of the key Guardians gets killed off, but also brought back, which kind of forces Gunn's hand quite a bit for what he can do with Star-Lord and how do you get Gamora back in. That she went off to become a Ravager. Sure. I mean, if we have to contrive an excuse for what's a connection to where she's still out there, but that would make sense to bring her back, sure. She's hanging out with Stallone. Fair enough. Works well enough. I mean, it definitely feels like a contrivance. We're forcing logic so that we can pull the pieces together, but it fits well enough in everything that's kind of the pieces on the table. It fits with the pieces. It doesn't contradict them. It just doesn't necessarily immediately feel set up. But I'll take it. So then Gamora joins in. And what some of this is fascinating is even the dialogue with Gamora. They keep talking about how she can't remember things when I feel like they don't know the plot of Endgame and Infinity War as well as we do, which is like she is time traveling Gamora. It's not that she forgot it. Like, there's the Star-Lord, like, you really don't remember any of it? Like, is Star-Lord being this obtuse, or is he, like, what? She literally is from the past. There's like a 10, 15-year swing between Rocket and Nebula and this Gamora. Because there was all the time that passed between Guardians 1 and Infinity War. Then there's the time jump that they aged, and she's from before all of that. And so, like, it's fascinating to even think about how many different where all of these people are in their ages and timelines, because 2 of them didn't get blipped. Several of them did, and one of them is from before the blip. There's not really a way to have the movie pause to process some of that. There's not really a reason to either. But us as MCU fans can sit there and just ponder like, there's a lot of actual time has kind of passed in here with some of this stuff. So I know that's just kind of interesting to me as I was, especially watching it the second time, playing out all the timelines and the nature of the way Star-Lord is talking to her feels like he doesn't even understand what happened to her as well as we as the audience do. Anyway, we're hanging out with the meat people. They go to this meat planet and, it's kind of a, it's a point A to point B movie where you're just trying to delay getting to everyone to the same place. And there's not a lot of moving parts here. So this is kind of like almost a side quest sort of thing of we just need to go here to find out the next place that we need to go. And it's a fun enough little sequence. A lot of little solid jokes in here with, Star-Lord trying to use his charm. The banter when Nathan Fillion walks in and, I got one of these guys too. Solid, funny stuff. Fun action sequence where, space starts, you messing around with the gravity. Drax having fun with it until he's getting shot. A lot of great little moments. And Mantis touching someone to make them fall in love. And so we'll pause right here. So one of my big issues with Guardians Volume 2 is that I really didn't like the dynamic between Drax and Mantis. And I've loved it and everything since. And it wasn't that there weren't moments in Volume 2 that worked for me. And the idea of what they were doing with the relationship is entirely present in that film, which is Drax, being Drax, says all these terrible things to her. But in the context where she is a slave to ego and he's talking down to her, it plays really weird. It plays in a way that doesn't sit well with me. And like you have these moments where you're ugly, and then it pauses and he goes, that's okay, because that means that people like you for who you are. And so you can see even that where the third movie makes the second movie better for me, because one of what the clear point is, Drax was never meant to be this revengeful destroyer who was meant to be a family man. And this whole Guardians thing was an offshoot of his family was killed by Thanos, and so he got sent on this rabbit trail of being the destroyer. But even in the middle of that, he finds this daughter in Mantis, where they, they're more friends, but there's absolutely, he's the not older and wiser, but in many ways, kind of that sort of element in there. And so he's like, it's okay, people, that people like you for who you are. And you get to the end of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and maybe the most important defining moment of that relationship, like Drax desperately running, carrying her because she's been knocked out. The ground starts to raise, and like with every ounce of strength he has, he lifts her as high as he can. The thought is exclusively, how do I get her up so she can survive? Like, how can I get her as much time as possible? I mean, of course I'm going to die here, but let me see if I can save her. And that little moment right there, in certain ways, reframes a lot of my frustrations with Guardians Volume 2 in and of itself. Every time I watch the movie, I'm frustrated by their dynamics. And then that moment happens and I go, I'm kind of wrong here. I know I'm kind of wrong, but I also don't think the execution here isn't great. It's a long there's a lot of rabbit trails. I got a lot to talk about with the Guardians. But so then you follow that up with the holiday special in particular, where you see them on this adventure. And the tweak that's so important is that she can dish it just as much as he can. She is insulting him just as directly. And in Volume 2, he insults her and she just takes it and she shrugs it down like this. In the holiday special and in Volume 3, don't be stupid. Don't be an idiot. And she's firing back at him. And they're like, even another one of these like moments that's so important but so subtle. There's this whole setup of you don't use your powers to erase your friend's feelings. You don't do things like that. And then you get into this moment deep into the film where Mantis is meaning to defend Drax about how much she loves him and cares about him. And through the course of the conversation says, yeah, I mean, I think you're stupid. It says it like not joking anymore, not exasperated. She's just being honest. I don't think you're very smart. Just says it directly to him. And very clearly, his feelings are hurt. And she immediately reaches over to erase that from his memory to make him feel better, which is an exact thing that she says that she does not do at the beginning of the film. Violates her rules, not for her brother, who's bummed out, which that would be more significant, but because she hurt his feelings. Those little moments that kind of define their relationship that are so much, I think, done better in this film. So you have these little moments where you realize that nonstop she's doing things to pester and drive him crazy. Back to the meat people. Thus, she touches a guy to make the guy fall in love with him just to make Drax feel uncomfortable. So a lot of great little kind of moments in here. In my review, I criticized, one of the things I brought up is that James Gunn probably needs to stop hiring his friends and family. And the internet has kind of gotten a little bit, they're picking on the fact that he cast his wife and singling in on that. And so then there's a group of people firing back. Actors or directors have long cast their friends, and James Gunn has always cast his friends in his movies, and they're singling her out of sexism. Like, well, I think it was also distracting when Nathan Fillion showed up. I like Nathan Fillion. I was watching Firefly 20 years ago. I was there opening weekend to go see Serenity in the theater. I did my part to get everyone at the college I was going to go see. Like, I like Nathan Fillion, have for 20 years. I'm all for the guy. And it's not even on the post him being cast in James Gunn's films, but these castings in this movie felt like M. Night Shyamalan cameos, which is to say, it's fun because it's like, hey, it's his buddy. Hey, it's his wife. Like, it's that sort of thing. You're watching the movie, and then Nathan Fillion, who's already had other parts in the 2 previous Guardians films, shows up, and it's his face. And so, hey, Nathan Fillion showed up. And it's supposed to make you go, it's that guy. And so it's distracting when it's like that. Likewise, it cuts to his wife, and there's just nothing about the character. It's not like he cast his wife in a character that he thought she was a good fit. It was just, there's a character that doesn't have much kind of personality. She's just kind of talking into a mic and then gets shot in the leg. And so she's just a character that's there. Like, it's not at all an actual, he cast the best actor for the part. No, he put his wife in the movie. That's where it's coming from. And I think both Nathan Fillion and his wife during the sequence felt a little bit like, I'm paying too much attention to who's been cast rather than does the content just work on its own. That's the criticism. It's the M. Night Shyamalan thing. It's not that I have an issue with James Gunn casting his wife in things, generically speaking, in the broad sense of his third. Like, I don't care at all that she's in Peacemaker, and then it made sense for her to show up in the sequence that was in Shazam 2 because it fit the story. Here, it's just, there she just is. Random part. And as soon as I see her, the file in my brain is James Gunn's wife. Nathan Fillion shows up, James Gunn's friend. I shouldn't be doing that while watching a movie. It pulls you out of it. And I shouldn't be going, M. Night Shyamalan. Look, it's that version of casting friends. It's like Martin Scorsese always casts Leonardo DiCaprio. Like, gotcha. Like, I understand that there's people like that. All of that is fine. But they're casting the best actor for the part, someone they work well with, rather than just cameoing in Leonardo DiCaprio into random scenes or whatever. That's not like, that's what this felt like, just cameoing his wife. That's crazy. So anyway, we get the information as a sequence. It's fun. Nothing specifically like compelling or anything, but just a fun little rabbit trail in the middle of all this. Might as well pause right here for Rocket's Flashbacks and Tragedy. And in my review of the film, I said that this might be the darkest film in the entire MCU. And I had people like, dude, seriously, it can't possibly be darker than Infinity War. And like, I get your point of you can't get bigger in terms of the scope of tragedy. If you kill half the galaxy, what do you kill 75% of the galaxy? 100% of the galaxy? Scope-wise, sure, Infinity War has the darkest thing that happens. But you could have a sequence in a Marvel movie where this would never happen, but that you're torturing a baby that's crying. This is one baby, but you're torturing a baby to death. That would obviously be darker than the end of Infinity War. Like, obviously, if you on screen torturing a baby to death, that is just like sick, disturbing stuff versus a bunch of heroes turning to dust while they're like, what's happening? Oh no. That's sad, tragic in its own way. In particular, the Spider-Man and Iron Man's arms. But when you have a whole subplot dedicated to these animals being experimented on, gaining intelligence, self-awareness, and then their entire lives are being tortured and experimented on while living in a cage, and they desperately find friendship with the people in their cage, only to know that they're referred to as just useless abominations and garbage and failed experiments. They serve no purpose other than to make something better, that they're going to be incinerated, and then they try to escape and they're killed off. That's a really bleak, dark storyline because it's personal. Sure, Infinity War is huge in its grand scope of the darkness of it. But even that one, Thanos, there was a somberness to what he was doing. He was doing it because he thought there was like, I'm doing this because I need to save resources. And it wasn't people in long-term suffering. And that's what you're watching in this movie is Rocket, for 2/3 of the film as a child, being abused, being in pain. And that is really bleak stuff. Like, that's the most unsettling, dark material in the entire MCU for me. Like, my wife was watching it last night. She's like glaring at me like she wants to kill me over it. Every time it cut back to Rocket as a child, she would just like tense up, glare at me, because it's really intense stuff. Bleak, dark stuff. They are animals. It's cruelty to animals, but essentially it's also cruelty to children. It's children. They've given them the intelligence of children, and then they're torturing them, and then they're incinerating them or planning to incinerate them. I mean, that's gut-wrenching. It's gross. It's disgusting. And it really makes you hate the High Evolutionary and all of his minions. Anyone that's complicit in what's going on, you want them to die a horrible death. So death so much worse than what they're able to allow Guardians, our heroes, to do to them. And I think part of what was like so sad about it is that also like you see them and they're horrifying. Like, you're very disturbed when you first see them. And then they're given these very sweet personalities, very kind-natured, very innocent-natured personalities while looking like these monsters. It's very reminiscent of Sid in Toy Story, where these creatures show up that look terrifying only to be kind-natured victims of a psycho, except it plays it straight. And you really, you spend time dwelling with these monsters with such kind-hearted souls, such innocence, hopeful that someday that they'll be free. And then only for Rocket to learn that they're all going to die. And they're so innocent that they can't even fathom the idea that they would be killed in that manner. Like, no, are you sure? Maybe we should just stay. Like, no, you will die if you do that. And there's a glimmer of hope that maybe that Rocket can be the one to give them their freedom for his friends. That I just want to go out with my friends. And then they die. And there never really was hope. All along, High Evolutionary assumed Rocket would try and do something like this. They were never going to be able to escape. And Rocket's carried that burden of they died because of him, even though they were going to die no matter what. He was clearly like there's nothing, like the only reason they had any hope was because Rocket was smart, could make a key, and tried to do the right thing. But like that to me, that sequence, that subplot is the most gut-wrenching thing in the entire MCU, of just absolute tragedy, actual tragedy of lives that just feel they're treated like they are nothing. They are meaningless. That's what makes it so bleak and so dark. High Evolutionary's perspective on them, treatment of them, just the movie through technology in the movies humanizes them, gives them self-awareness, personality, and then he dehumanizes them. You're just garbage experiment, wasted experiments. Except you, Rocket, but not you, Rocket, just your brain. I just need to study your brain, but you're still garbage. That is so horrifically gut-wrenching. So to this point, let's talk about our High Evolutionary. And I don't think he's a great villain, largely because what holds him back is that he's a shrieking villain. The idea of what his goal and objective, I think, works. They create a scenario where he's a formidable threat, where you hate him for so many things that he's done, both on the personal level, he did stuff to Rocket, as well as he's a genocidal maniac. He's a psycho that needs to be stopped for the great, like everything that he's doing is disturbing and disgusting. So he needs to be stopped. So all of those are really good things. But on the characterization, he's presented as this guy that just keeps shrieking and yelling. There's moments that are like nice touches where like whenever he would grab Rocket's head, the way that he would grab Rocket's head just made Rocket seem so vulnerable. And he's saying something that has this element of sweetness, while this element of, you are nothing to me, but your brain is something that I'm interested in. And he just holds it in a manner that even his hands communicate that. And the way he does it several times, grabs him like that. And you're like, ugh. And you feel it like you're in danger as soon as his hands do that. But then he shrieks. He's just yelling and shouting and acting weird. And there's like, the movie alludes to his treatments and some other stuff going on with him. And I don't know if there were some deleted scenes that might have fleshed him out a little bit better to balance out the characterization. But I didn't think the characterization was great. Maybe it's the performance, but I'm sure it was kind of written that way. So I just say, like, you did a bad performance when that's what James Gunn wanted him to do and what he was hired to do. Because it wasn't bad acting. It wasn't like it wasn't convincing. It's just that the nature of it was just so shouty. I think the thing that worked well was this idea of this person obsessed with creating this better thing, who looks down so much on his creations. They're just creations to him. They're nothing. He values his work as it keeps progressing forward, but he doesn't actually care about individual things that he created. They're nothing to him in this very sick sense. And then one of his creations is able to solve a problem very easily. And this to him is utterly fascinating, but also insulting. That he's just like, what? Wait, I didn't figure this out. He did? That thing did? That thing figured out? Like, and he's torn between, I created that, and I don't know why it can do that. And wait, why can it do that? And I didn't figure it out. It figured out, and I didn't figure it out. Why did it do that? What is that? And it's just all these layers to his obsession. Like, I think that's the stuff that kind of worked the best. The obsession, especially growing obsession with Rocket and his uniqueness. That to me was fun and interesting. I think one of the problems you always kind of run into with both the plot line in this one as well as the last one, of having these incredibly powerful villains that don't know about the Guardians of the Galaxy. Though Star-Lord, Rocket, they're not in hiding. They're not being secretive. In the case of Rocket, he quite literally, well, I mean, I guess all of the Guardians of the but like they saved the galaxy. Literally, I mean, in Endgame, and High Evolutionary can't find him. He's clearly not in hiding at all throughout these movies. He's out there loudly proclaiming what he's up to, and no one, and he's the talking raccoon. He's yelling about his backstory and his pain, and he's at nowhere getting drunk. And he's not in hiding, but the High Evolutionary hasn't been able to find him. There's always a little bit of those issues in these movies, but I think the High Evolutionary, when it came to like being someone that you hated, creating a villain that, I think one of the problems with recent MCU villains is a lot of them are designed to be a little bit sympathetic. They're trying to do Thanos, but doing a bad job of it. And so you're like, it's ambiguous. And you watch this movie, and a High Evolutionary, it's not ambiguous. You understand what he's trying to do. You just also know he's a psycho. You hate him, and you want to see him absolutely destroyed. The movie does that quite well. That'll bring us to Counter Earth, where our High Evolutionary, using Rocket's fixed evolution machine, populates a planet with these creatures that don't have the aggression that they originally had, that's supposed to be his perfected Earth, minus our bigotry. Which, once again, you hear it, and it's the sort of thing that just sounds like you hear it and you're like, wait, the guy that looks down on everything besides himself, the guy that'll just incinerate these things, this is the guy lecturing us on our bigotry? Really? What? But so he creates his version of Earth that makes for some fun little bits as our Guardians show up and there's some miscommunications. I don't have too much to like talk about on the planet of the little gags or anything like that. Star-Lord's attitude is, let's just go straight, go in, let's head on in, while telling other people to protect Rocket. I think some of this, once again, is where you have those issues with the clunkiness of the plot. You know that guy right there is trying to get Rocket, who's right here. So you should probably, if you want to go talk to the guy there, you go in there, get someone else to fly you in. You have a lot of friends. Have someone else taxi flying to get you. Let's get Rocket way over there. Like the idea that we're taking Rocket to the person that's trying to take Rocket. There's some lapses in logic. Now you could say Star-Lord's being impulsive. It's a last minute Hail Mary. There's some explanations to it. There's also a little bit of you're having to force the plot forward in certain ways. So, anyway, Star-Lord goes in and, with Groot, gets in a shootout with the High Evolutionary and his people, where, you get the scene in the trailer. It has Groot shouting, "We are Groot," as they're blasting people. Not a line in the movie. It makes for a great shot in the trailer, but that's pretty frustrating to claim that Groot shouts "We are Groot" while shooting blasters with Star-Lord, and then in the movie he just says "I am Groot." That is an important distinction and a weird, dishonest thing to put in your trailer just to sell tickets. So anyway, they shoot a bunch of people. Star-Lord grabs one of those Weasley dudes with information, and like, thank you for sparing me. And you're like, I don't think Star-Lord's going to spare this guy. And so they end up using him as a part of their cushion when they crash onto the ground, which is kind of nice to see him get kind of this just brutal death as Star-Lord and Groot parachute down to the ground. And they use this once again to set up kind of the final little bit where they go in the movie with Star-Lord of he always has these crazy plans where he does something impulsive and finds a way out of it. You set that up to misdirect where the movie goes towards the end of it. But anyway, they're able to get a hold of the data, but in the process, Drax convinces Mantis to ride on a motorcycle to go and confront Evolutionary with Star-Lord. some of this stuff that feels like we're just writing characters to do dumb things because we have to get them to places to move the plot forward. If I'm just objectively dissecting the constructs of what led to certain things happening, I think there are some clunky issues here. But like I said, doesn't really bother me. But that's the stuff like Drax. Let's just go over there. Let's jump on. They jump on as Star-Lord jumps off. They just happen to jump right to where children are at, which makes them realize that they can't just get off. They have to also rescue the children. Like, it's coincidences, forced decisions that just happen to work out the way the plot needs them to work out. Anyway, but back with Rocket, they're trying to save him, and I think they if you're deciding, I didn't think they were going to kill Rocket off because the trailer shows him in the third act. They show a bunch of shots of him in the third act with a big ray gun, shooting people, delivering lines in a hallway in multiple locations that we have not seen in the movie yet. That would be seriously misleading advertising if you were to kill him in this scene and then also show him in all these shots in the trailer. So I don't know. You shouldn't write your movie and shoot your movie to be able to cut your trailer. But if you could cut a trailer that's a little bit less, in a sense, spoilery for one of the most tense moments in your movie. If you have an opening sequence where Rocket is shooting guns, you can put that in the trailer. Even take the sequence that was there. They have him get shot before he gets to go to work with his ray guns shooting at Adam Warlock. You could have had shots of Rocket shooting at Adam Warlock. Give him his 30-second shootout. Gives you a bunch of footage to put in the trailer so you don't have to put third act him with a gun after the scene where he's supposed to die. But they lean real heavily into it. And since I was pretty sure he wasn't going to die because I saw him in the trailers in other locations, as soon as they started doing the heaven stuff, I was like, I bet, okay, they're gonna tell him at the end of it, we can't wait to see you, but not yet. And so it's a pretty impactful sequence because they the idea is so much so to show how much these characters desperately care about each other, which Gamora is just now seeing. She's seeing all these idiots. Like, why are you doing all this dumb stuff? And then you're in this moment where she's desperately sad about something. Desperately sad as they're watching his friend on the table. And so you start to see her soften and understand what all this is. These friends, what they're really about. Starts to get it a little bit. And Rocket comes back, and I actually got to hop back a little bit because I forgot they blew up the planet. Kind of important detail, but so there's this lot's fairly straightforward on this movie, but every sequence has a bunch of layers to it. But and so this nice little moment where the comms go through, and Star-Lord realizes all of his other friends aren't dead. He thought they were dead. Realizes they're not dead. And they're talking, and then Rocket speaks. And Nebula, cold-hearted Nebula, here's Rocket. And, gets emotional. That's profound stuff. When you have a character like that, who's introduced the way that she was, even who she was all throughout Guardians Volume 2, it gets a pretty dramatic shift. And you have to remember, there's 5 years. 5 years where we lost the Guardians. Except Nebula and Rocket. It's easy to kind of leave that piece out when you're just watching the Guardians movies. That for them, there's 5 extra years with the 2 of them. And so who's the person that isn't there to see Rocket brought back, but just hears his voice? That's such relief. We saved him. We did it. We brought him back. Whew. Powerful stuff. Forgot something, though. High Evolutionary, upon realizing that his perfect civilization wasn't perfect, and it still had crime and other things, blows up the planet. And this was once again, a movie that is really bleak and dark, where you introduce children, babies, families, marriages, people going to work, and they're just innocent people, but they're not perfect. The High Evolutionary destroys the planet. It's, again, darkest MCU film. You have very personal stuff with Rocket, and then you have a guy callously, without concern, blowing up a planet. And we saw the babies and children on it. And you start to see it explode, and houses with families in them being just incinerated. Just because it was a bad batch. Wasn't perfect, so we got to get rid of him. He could have just left it. No, this one wasn't perfect. Blow it up. Just like why this villain is so sick, so gross, so nasty, and someone that you want to absolutely see defeated and destroyed. Other thing that kind of happens in here while Adam is battling with Gamora to try and get Rocket, because the planet's exploding, the Sovereign gets blown up. Mother gets blown up. And I think at this point in time, they seemed like they didn't quite know what to do with. They knew where they wanted to end with Adam, but there's this area where it seemed like they didn't want him to join the Guardians too soon. But what exactly is his motivation when he's like still trying to beat up the Guardians when they didn't blow up his mother? And it's already too late. Whatever he was trying to do to save his people, it seems like that ship has sailed. So what is he doing in the third act still fighting the Guardians? Feels like the stuff with, and I think because they wanted the final save of, he needed to be the one to finally save Star-Lord, they had to delay his turn. But so he's just kind of spinning his wheels throughout the third act. Maybe he's too powerful that they couldn't have him join just yet. But again, weren't quite sure what to do with Adam Warlock in this movie at times. That'll bring us to our final showdown, where 3 of our Guardians are on High Evolutionary's ship. They realize the movie wasn't dark enough. Not only are we torturing animals, committing genocide, but we also have child slavery. So we're kind of hitting all the fun subjects in this one. And they do just a little bit where the two women in the group don't really know how to interact with children. Nebula in particular is terrible with them. And Drax is the one that's like, what are you doing? You're scaring them. Come on. And he's still Drax. He's still insulting them, but in his very Drax way. And in a way that is comforting to the children. And then he starts communicating with them. And you kind of see this other side to him, that if we're trying to go on this whole journey and arc from realizing we talked about this before, he entered all of this because he's out for revenge over losing his family. He was like, and all throughout these movies, he talked about his wife, how he knew she was the perfect one. Like that, he's like family man. We only saw him in the weird phase of his life. That's not who he's supposed to be. And so you start to like pull something together to find that, like, how do you tell a story beat that really reminds us he was never supposed to be this guy? This is not who he was. And you bring us back to see the other side to him that we never really got much of. I mean, even the joke in the trailer, the joke when they land on Counter Earth, a girl throws a ball at him, and it plays like, oh, Drax. The other side to it is Drax is the one that wants to play with the kid. Now he's Drax. He doesn't know how to do it properly, so he throws the ball way too hard. But Drax immediately starts interacting with the child and having fun with the child. And then you see that again here. Drax is the one that knows how to interact with, like, gets silly with kids and plays with kids. But we also, other important deal, we have 3 characters on here. Other Guardians over here, they have to go rescue them. So create a scenario where we're going to pull it all together, and we're going to have Nowhere show up with Kraglin to smash into this gigantic ship. So And I think going back to a little issue before, if you're trying to do our big gigantic battle, they when it starts going down, they show all the enormous number of these monstrosities fly out towards Unknown, towards our Guardians, and it seems like there's too many of them for our Guardians to defeat. This feels like this would have been a great moment for a fleet of Ravagers to show up, led by Sylvester Stallone. Their role in the story is to fight off all these things that were unleashed, the ones that don't get into Unknown that Kraglin takes out, but they also create the gap that makes it so our Guardians can fly in and do their thing. Very odd in my mind that they didn't. You set up the Ravagers as this fleet of people, you got Stallone, you created the army that the Ravagers would fight, introduced it on screen, and then we don't actually get to see that happen. So, during this, the High Evolutionaries, people start to turn on him. They're like, you're nuts. Like, what are you doing? Like, just go do our next experiment. Stop obsessing, because they don't get, like, why High Evolution is so deeply offended, so passionate about this one creature. But us as the audience, we kind of get it. Because he's legitimately offended that a monstrosity would be so able to solve a problem. And at the same time, he did it. He created it. But so he's obsessed, and it's driving them to destruction. So shuffle our Guardians around in here a little bit. Once again, one of the reasons I like this final battle versus Guardians Volume 2 is it was always clear what we're trying to do. We're trying to get on the ship. These people are trying to survive from these monsters. We're trying to free all the children. We're trying to free all the animals. Always clear objectives of what we're trying to do. And so in an action sequence, you know why things matter, how it ties into the grander scope of what's taking place. So in all of this, eventually our Guardians all kind of get together, and Peter's like, let's get out of here. Gamora's like, let's get out of here. Rocket's like, or Drax like, no. We got to be good juju. Kids, we got to be a good friend. We have to go get them. And in particular, Rocket's immediately like, no, I'm through running. And it's a line that's in the trailer, but it plays very different in the movie than it does in the trailer. Because in this one, it's like Rocket is taking the lead. We're going back, and we're going to destroy these people and free everyone being tortured by this monster. Leads to this hallway sequence, which is a really cool sequence. I think it's a single shot. I mean, obviously this thing is CGI to the max. It's not, Daredevil oneer, but that doesn't matter in any way. Like, it's not designed to be like the Daredevil oneers, but they do this sequence where they're in this tight hallway, but it's like a wide angle lens. And the camera's just flying around as you're seeing our Guardians working together, just tearing these dudes to pieces in all these creative different ways, using all of their different skill sets, all of their different technology, strength, all of it. And it's a cool, I would say that's the coolest action sequence in James Gunn's Guardians films that they've done with them. But they destroy this whole room full of people, free the children. And I guess the other forgot in there, back as the creatures were getting into nowhere, and they show way too many of them in space versus how many actually get into nowhere. But which, once again, that's why the Ravagers would have been a useful plot point, and nice to see Stallone again and giving Stallone more to do. But so they start like rushing through the crack, and it looks really bad. And then Kraglin finally figures out how to use his little arrow. It's a simple little arc. It's nothing complex, but it's like just the right thing to make this guy that's kind of been a screw up be the savior of their little celestial head. And then his arrow gets stuck, and it's a moment like looks really bad. And then once again, we pay off the other little bit with Kraglin. Cosmo. Dog smashes the guy. Just a great little way to follow up on that little bit set up at the beginning of the movie, that you don't need to give these characters a ton of time. They just have little splashes throughout the movie. Nice little payoff, especially in regards to our little town that we have here. Now, I saw some people on the internet like, why was Kraglin and Cosmo even in this movie? What purpose did they serve? Well, they serve first off, they don't need that much time. They just serve to like be the people over nowhere that bring nowhere into it. Like their function, like Kraglin's always kind of been this bad character, and he's kind of a bad character in this one. He just now has Cosmo that he's bantering with because he doesn't have Yondu. And so then he's the side character that takes this important part of the third act. Like it's pretty clear why he was in the movie and what he was doing, what his function was. Anyway, back, we're trying to save the children. So Cosmo uses Cosmo's power to like hold the building together so the people can cross over. Once again, why is Cosmo in this movie? There's actually a purpose here for this very grand scale. If you want to have a big finale with massive stakes and a big gigantic victory and they're actual guardians, actual saviors, how do you do that? You have them free literal slaves and free a whole Noah's Ark. How do you free them and put them onto their small little ship? You can't. You need something bigger. Hence why we have this whole plot line throughout the special and then this one that their new home is that celestial head from the first movie. Because we need something big enough that we can put all of these children and animals on. So Cosmo saves the day, holds it together, and they just have this little beat where Rocket gets distracted. Rocket is walking around, finds they have a moment and they're like, we've got to save all the higher life forms. Rocket finds the lower life forms, the ones that don't have higher intelligence. They don't have self-awareness. They haven't gone through the evolutionary process yet. And he realizes that this is like, he sees the cage that he was probably pulled out of. Or in the beginning of the movie, you see him pulled out of him. And he looks down, it says raccoon. And he's fought that because he thinks he's just this like monster thing that was put together. Even one of the little lines of dialogue at the beginning of it was, oh, they put a mask on you. It's raccoon face. But it's not a raccoon face. It's his face. The other stuff's the stuff that was added. And so he's always doubted, is he actually a raccoon? I'm Rocket. And he sees that. I'm these guys right here. That was me. They were going to be me. And they said, let's save the higher life forms. And then Rocket's like, we have to save all of them because it was me at some point in time. And like the most irresponsible, brash, frustrating of the Guardians is just like putting every raccoon he can on his body to try and save all of them. High Evolutionary flies in. We get a little bit of an action sequence, but they don't even try to make this like anything remotely close to. High Evolutionary gets no respect as a fighter or anything like that. He's powerful, but he's a dummy. He doesn't know how to fight. He doesn't know, like, he's just, his ego drives him mad to like go into the room and just throw Rocket around without concern for anything else. Cause he thinks, of course I'll win. It's me. This abomination can't defeat me. And so they do nothing to give him respect. He uses his technology to throw Rocket around. Rocket undoes that. So when Rocket turns to face High Evolutionary, having accepted, I am a raccoon. Like, I'm not just an abomination. I am a raccoon that was messed with, but I'm one of them. Finally says, full name, Rocket Raccoon, doesn't fight it, embraces it to fight back against the High Evolutionary. And then the Guardians show up and just tear this dude to pieces. Every single one of them gets to land a shot, destroy him. He does not put up a fight. And then Gamora walks up to him and just out of curiosity rips his freaking face off. Just goes face right off. And it was like, whoa, they just showed that in a Marvel movie. They showed that in a Disney movie. The guy's face gets ripped off and his eyes are just beetle around in his skull. Like, they did that. That's right. Probably the goriest of our Marvel movies, and pretty shocked they got away with that. That's the Disney influence, being able to be like, MPA, we're getting a PG-13. I don't care that we're pushing the boundaries with the F word, the faces getting ripped off, animals being tortured. We're Disney, give us a PG-13. Rips a freaking guy's face off. My theater had a lot of kids in it. There was a lot of kids younger than my two oldest in that theater. I was like, whoa, they weren't traumatized by the animal abuse. The face getting ripped off will freak someone out. You just hear people throughout the movie, but they rip his face off, leave him behind. Rocket's like, we're taking everybody. So they load up all of the other life forms to escape. And once again, just like this satisfying victory. That's what this movie had, like, it's the full spectrum of emotions. You have gut-wrenching loss, Rocket's friends. You have a backstory which just makes you just like feel sick in your stomach. And because you know that it's a movie where they're willing to kill animals, they're willing to just viciously treat sentient beings as garbage to be thrown away. When you have a victory, when people are saved, you feel it. And it's not just our guardians are able to be saved. It's also they stop the evil, free the slaves, and free these animals that are being tortured. All of it happens. But Star-Lord is Star-Lord. And all of these little setup payoffs, all of these little callbacks, much like all the way back in our first time our guardians came together, when they're escaping, Star-Lord says, whoa, I got to go grab something. Rushes back to grab something, and Drax's immediate first reaction is like, you are so brave, until he realizes it's a Walkman. And then he calls him an imbecile. We're bookending our characters. Star-Lord is in the middle of a building that's exploding. He has no time, and he turns around to grab his Zune because he dropped it. Pick it up, because I can't lose this. This is important. Consistent with the dumb stuff that he's done before. And they've set up in this movie that he always comes up with some ridiculous plan to escape. There's always some way that he's able to get out of it. Always something. And so they've primed your brain to that. Like, how's he going to get out of this stupid thing? So he's running. And as you see, like he's running and you see him grab like a hose and stuff. And so once again, your brain is primed to what you're paying more attention than normal to how is he getting out of this stupid situation that he put himself into. And you see him fly through space. It seems a little bit more desperate than normal. And you reach a moment where you're like, oh, that's not going to work. He's not going to make it. And he's stuck and he's frozen. And we've seen him freeze in space before. This goes longer, and then he starts to bloat. And man, once again, you're like, oh, this isn't a PG-13 movie. Oh man, are they going to kill him? And I had a hard time believing they were actually going to kill him because they spent so much time talking about going back to his grandfather. That they brought that back up, that you've been running. Have you ever gone to go see your grandfather? And they pull the picture up, and Gamora looks at it. Then Gamora gives it back to him. So they've set something up that I was like, do they kill him off? And the end of the movie is the Guardians going to the grandpa? Because you have to pay that off. You have to do something with it. So are the Guardians going to go and say, your grandson was the savior of the galaxy for all these different reasons? He also, remember when the blip happened, that was also on him. But he's the guardian of the galaxy. Is that where they're going to go with this? Is that how they're going to close this thing out? By having them. And so you see, like, it looks, this guy's toast. And then they zoom out to his hand. And it's like, they can't possibly, like, linger on his death on his hand. There's something's going to happen. And I was like, wait, so they did something to set up Adam Warlock. Groot saved him. And so then I think they're intentionally trying to recreate famous painting, the finger of all the ways to illustrate it, have the shot. Adam flies out, touches his finger and brings him back. Like the fingers like that, brings him back and saves him. And, all is okay. So that'll bring us to our epilogue where they kind of close out this journey. And you start to realize all of our guardians were deeply broken people running away from something, not really dealing with the trauma of their past, but they were a Band-Aid for one another. A Band-Aid that was great for each other, great for the galaxy. But as individuals, as for their trauma, it was a Band-Aid. They weren't really living how they're probably supposed to be living. And That's what storytelling is. You have characters that need to go on a journey to either discover their better version of themselves, if it's, they call it a comedy, even if it's not a comedy. But if comedy, then that better version. If it's a tragedy, they don't grow and they don't change, and then that ultimate flaw in them leads to their destruction. But so you go on this journey throughout 3 films that helps them to realize what they really needed, what they were really looking for. Heal just enough wounds or help see where they need to go. So you get to the end of it and Star-Lord realizes, and why does he need Gamora so much? Why does he need Gamora back so much? Because he's not properly dealing with everything else that took place. Because she was a Band-Aid, Guardians were a Band-Aid, and not all Band-Aids are bad. Band-Aids are good things, but they're not also healing the wound. And he realizes that. Like, he doesn't need this new Gamora to be his old Gamora anymore, because he realized that. What he really needs to do is go back to where all of this started. And so he breaks up the Guardians, and they have all these just like great little moments in there. I mean, probably the standout one for me is of course with Drax, the character that all of us thought was going to die in the movie. You think he's going to die, and instead they go back to the thing that we forgot about, which we've discussed greatly in here, which is that he started this because he was a family man, and he lost his family and was out for revenge. But that was resolved a while ago. But he wasn't meant to be a destroyer. So it was just a little moment of all the characters, Nebula's the one that's like, you were meant to be a dad. I need you here. Like, and her whole motivation to everything was about her family sucked growing up because of Thanos, putting her at odds with her sister. And so you have her get to this point in time where she goes, I want to build the family that I wish I'd had. Character arcs, conclusions, and getting places. And then Rocket, still kind of this adventurer person, he's now put in charge of the Guardians. You kind of have these arcs that you like, completes them in ways that you didn't even realize you were looking for that thing. And so they go off on their ways, and it, like when you see, in Mantis, like I've always had people telling me what to do, and what am I about? And Drax, I'll go with you. It's like no, I need to go. I don't need you to protect me. And even that fatherly, I'll protect you, I'll take care of you. That was his gut reaction, because he defines himself by that nature of taking care of others. As soon as he stopped being out for vengeance, now he's defending someone. And he doesn't even realize it. Like, he doesn't even see that about himself. And so as soon as Nebula brings it to his attention, what his real purpose is, you even see a certain joy in that. And then as just this stiff, like caricature of an alpha, when Mantis is leaving and he's just so sad and he's happy, he's like, he knows it's absolutely right, but he's like just tears of happiness for her finding herself, tears of losing his friend, and it's him crying. Such a powerful, profound stuff. Another thing they put in the trailer. Like, they literally put the farewell between Drax and Mantis in the trailer for the movie. Okay. So I'm trying to put all these in order, but so then this party starts to break out. At the beginning of the movie, Rocket plays I'm a Creep. At the end of the movie, we're playing dance music. And they're all breaking into song and dance. And something's been healed. They've found themselves. They're losing the family that they desperately needed, that they never had, but also moving on to whatever's more important, what afterwards. Storytelling, bookends, character journey, all that stuff. You get to the end of it, the music communicates so much. And of course, some of these characters, Rocket, Groot dancing isn't terribly interesting or surprising. Nebula joins in. Like, she's a radically different person than who was introduced. And each time we've seen her, there's a little bit of growth there. And you think it's been 9 years in the realm of since that movie came out, but 5 years of blip in addition to that. So for her, it's like a 15-year journey for her. the exact timeline of what I don't know exactly, but it's over 10 years journey that she's been on here. Same with Rocket. It's over 10-year journey that he's been. Also, you have to keep in mind, didn't touch on this, but I believe they've said Guardians Volume 2 takes place 6 months after Volume 1. That was my understanding of the timeline that they've said. In which case, even why is Rocket so different from that movie, and why is Nebula so different from that movie to here? The 10 years takes place after Volume 2. That's a lot of time for characters to transform as they're finding happiness and family in a lot of ways. But of course, the most interesting one to break into dance is Drax, who they've running gag repeatedly throughout these movies. Drax does not dance. Even that's how he found his wife, is that he does not dance. She didn't dance. He didn't dance. People that dance are morons. But he's there with children. And he's a dad. And what do dads do? What's like one of the defining things of dads is they embarrass themselves for their children. They do things they would not otherwise do for their children. That's who Drax is too. The Drax that we haven't really seen, but that doesn't also feel out of character for what we do know about him. And so him dancing is like the bizarre bookend to his journey that you never knew that you needed or wanted. Being subversive in the good way, where the writing is better than what we would have come up with and what we predicted. Yeah, I mean, what's left for Drax? Because Drax, he's already avenged his family, and the Dave Bautista said he doesn't want to do it anymore. So yeah, you kill him off, so he dies for his friends. I think there was another line in there that's not in the movie in the trailer that implied he was going to die. Yeah, you kill him off so that he's saving his friends, because what else does he have left? But that assumes he's supposed to be the destroyer and not the dad. James Gunn knew something about the character better than we did. So it ends on the note that makes more sense. So then we close out with Star-Lord returning to Earth. First movie kicks off with his grandpa. You always forget that. It starts off with his grandpa. And, Star-Lord frames it in this movie. His grandpa was a total jerk. That's a child's interpretation of what was really going on there. But it's not in any way a grown-up's interpretation of the grandpa and how he handled things. Not that grandpa was great about it, but that it's like hurt people, and children don't always interpret complex situations properly. But so it bookends that. Like he's been running ever since his mother died. And so you have him return, and you have the grandpa sees him, instantly recognizes him, and we started with grandpa, and we return to grandpa. Bookends. Closing out that journey so well, so satisfying, and having the characters find peace. That's what this movie did so very well. And why it ends and you just like, that was it. That was good. That was so satisfying what you're able to do. So then we get a mid and post-credit scene. We have the Guardians of the Galaxy led by a Rocket with this fresh new lineup out on a mission to go and help people. And the banter's continuing. They're playing around with this idea of they've got the Zune with the 300 songs, and they're all discussing their favorite music and their favorite songs before they have this big battle where you've got Kraglin formally in the uniform, joining in on the fun, not just the guy in the sidelines kind of helping, but really in on the action. Then, of course, Adam Warlock, finally, officially member of this Guardians of the Galaxy. He has had a full arc from I'm going to try and capture, kill, kidnap Rocket to I am taking orders from Rocket. I have joined teams with them. These are the good guys now. And, they're classic Guardians, but with a new lineup, and final little bit reveal on there that they've been sitting on a rock. Turns out it's Groot, who is gigantic. And there's a little joke in the middle of the movie where Groot grows gigantic and they go, don't do kaiju Groot, don't do kaiju Groot. And it seems like now Groot's just sitting there we thought he was swole in the holiday special and in this movie. Crazy thick, massive Groot in this one. Then we get the final post-credit scene where essentially it's just Peter with his grandpa having a conversation. It's a weird scene. And I'll get into this in just a second, but it's a weird scene because it like zooms in on this shot, and in a way that's very uncommon for Marvel movies, there's a box of Magic Spoon cereal just sitting there, like just they're sitting eating food, and like on the front of the table, Magic Spoon, and it just kind of zooms in on them eating Magic Spoon cereal. It just like so overt in a way, like, okay, what's the payoff here? But you're like really focusing in on the brand there. That's weird. And if you look at the newspaper, it's a fun little joke referencing the holiday special about Kevin Bacon telling all about his alien abduction. And the banter between Grandpa and Star-Lord is about Grandpa has a new wife. New wife has a son, so I guess this is Grandpa's stepson. What is that? Second cousin or whatever a grandparent's sibling is to you. The step version of that is 45, and he doesn't want to mow the lawn, and so they're just kind of like, 45, he's not doing anything, and then it ends. Which feels like if you want to do like some like little banter, we've done some stuff like that before. Maybe it's trying to be like the shawarma scene in the first Avengers, but it just felt like we're leading up to some more of a punchline of a joke than that, and it doesn't really go anywhere. This is an odd scene for like, okay, Magic Spoon is this just way crazy overt product placement, and then that's the whole joke, that's the whole scene, and then it cuts to the legendary Star-Lord will return. So not the Guardians will return, Star-Lord will return, which is interesting because which project? Where are you going to bring him back? He's on Earth, so it makes sense that he could get involved in some adventures, but which one? Which project is he a part of? That doesn't surprise me. Chris Pratt seems like the kind of guy that I think he knows his strengths and his weaknesses, and he's not like when we're all wired a little bit different. Like Dave Bautista wants to keep growing as an actor and work with all these different directors and move into smaller films and comedies. And so he's building out this very robust filmography of having worked with a bunch of great directors in a bunch of different genres. Chris Pratt seems very, very content to be movie star guy that is just trying to get big roles and big things. And so as long as he can play Star-Lord in this very popular franchise, I imagine he will. And I don't begrudge him for that. Like that's not in any way criticism. I'm just observing the way that they do their different careers. I don't even remember if I said it in my Who Will Die video, but one of my arguments in my head, at least, I think I trimmed it up, but I think I recorded, but I trimmed it out. One of my arguments for why I didn't think they were going to kill Star-Lord is because Chris Pratt will play Star-Lord as long as they want him to play Star-Lord. And so you get to the end of it, Star-Lord will return. I wonder which project. And I wonder if it'll be sooner than later. Like, is he going to show up in the Marvels? Is that like one of the ways they're going to try and like amp up the Marvels, is have Star-Lord show up in it? We're going to get another trailer in a month with Chris Pratt in it or something like that? Or is it just he's going to be in the Avengers and they just don't know if the other people are going to show up in the Avengers? I don't know. But it makes you curious because you have a character who up to this point in time is entirely connected to the Guardians. That is his thing, that group of people. And they specifically say this character, not the Guardians, will return. And, he was blipped, so he doesn't have the connections that a Rocket and Nebula have. What does that look like? I don't know. Fascinated by that one. So I kind of like that specific tease. Final kind of thought on here. Theory could be total hogwash, could have no basis on any sort of reality. Why was that post-credit scene so weird? I wonder, and I think I saw some other people speculating with someone else about this. I wonder if, so they introduce the new grandma is a black lady. And so she has a son that she brought in from previous relationship. What if the big reveal was supposed to be the son that's not mowing the lawn is a Kang variant? What if the scene is supposed to have this big payoff of Jonathan Majors? And there's ties back, like, how do you like very lightly tie Star-Lord into our multiverse saga? What if Star-Lord's grandmother's son, or step-grandmother's son, is a Kang variant. The one on this Earth. Our Earth. Not multiverse one, the one on this Earth. There's the connection right there. And he's supposed to be like, that was just like the little final little tease in the movies. It cuts to outside and he's just, Jonathan Majors is sitting there watching someone else mow the lawn. And you go, oh, and it puts, wherever it's cut, it puts a little smile on your face. And you're also like, ooh, what does this mean? But the last 2 months happened. And you're in a little bit of a pickle here of you. If you want to do the card with Star-Lord, you probably want to have something about Star-Lord, and you have the scene you thought was kind of cute, but you don't have the final tag, the payoff for it of what was going on outside. I wonder. This total speculation of like what they, because it just felt like an incomplete, weird scene. It felt like a weird bit if it wasn't meant to do something else. If there wasn't something that trimmed, cut out, it's a very weird, odd bit. It's a theory. Probably a crazy theory, but with some, recent events, if the MCU wants to play it safe, like how do you, we're not cutting ties, we don't know what's going to pan out with the accusations, but trimming out 5 seconds in a post-credit scene, we can do that. I wonder. Total speculation. I have no evidence of this. The solo evidence is the grandmother, and the scene felt truncated. It felt incomplete, like there was supposed to be one more beat. There's supposed to be a payoff to this guy won't mow the lawn. Felt like there's supposed to be one more thing there, and it wasn't. So I wonder. Anyway, there we have it. There is my spoiler thoughts on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Saw it a second time last night. Loved it. Thought it was great. I don't want to spoil my rankings for any of this, but let's just say it is we're competing with the first Guardians. I think it is each of them do different things better than the other. Each of them have things about them that are special to me. And one of them has reasons and grades. Make that what you will. But they're close in my mind as to which one could be where. Let me know your thoughts down below. Spoil away like crazy, because it's a spoiler review. Thank you so much for watching. Be on the lookout for my upcoming Marvel content, and keep talking movies and TV too much. Bye-bye.